Now the first thing we're going to do to create our Entity Framework project is go ahead and click New Project. And we're going to go ahead and create a console application for this, as we don't really care about the GUI at this point. And then we're going to go ahead and just create a EF. Just go ahead and create our project name. Go ahead and click OK. Now once my project is completely being created, let's go ahead and go over to Solution Manager. I'm going to go ahead and create a new file. So I'm going to go right click, do Add New Item. When the Add New Item comes up, I'm going to go ahead and go into Data, and I'm going to choose ADO.NET Entity Data Model. And we're going to rename this to Dimecast Model. I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to be presented with my data model wizard. I'm going to go ahead and choose Generate from Database, as we're going to take our existing data model and generate our entities off of that. So let's go ahead and click Next. Now once I've done this, it's going to ask me to provide a connection string. And I can choose an existing connection string, or I can go ahead and create a new one. So let's go ahead and create a new one. I'm going to create this as a localhost server. I'm going to use Windows authentication. The next thing I'm going to do is come down and choose my database I want to use. So let's go ahead and use Dimecast.net. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now once that's done, it's saying go ahead and generate my connection string for me. This is the connection string that Entity Framework uses, and it looks a little bit different than the connection string you're probably used to using, just using ADO or some other object relational mapper. Now inside of this is the connection string you're used to seeing, which is data source equals localhost, initial catalog equals Dimecast, blah blah blah. But there's also some stuff in here that allows the Entity Framework to know how to find your entity model. The next thing you want to set is how to save our connection string in our app.config. We're going to go ahead and leave it as Dimecast.net entities. I'm going to go ahead and click Next. Now when you click Next, you're going to get to a next screen that allows you to choose what it is you want to map. So if you have stored procedures, you can expand those. If you have tables, you can expand those. So we're going to go ahead and choose our various episode-based items. And we'll do author and leave that one off. So I've chosen those, and then I can come down and I can choose a couple options. One, I can pluralize or singularize generate object names. What this allows you to do is basically take a database that the name of the database is single or singularized, and maybe add an S, ES, whatever, or basically pluralize that name in order to have it match your convention. You can also include foreign key constraints by default. And then finally you can choose what namespace you want your entities generate under. What I would recommend is leave these both checked and go ahead and make a namespace that makes sense for your application. So let's go click Next. And once it's done generating the model, you'll get something that looks like this. And let's go ahead and zoom in. And you can see that I have my level type, my episode, keywords, comments, authors, whole slew of things. So if I pan out, you'll see there's a lot of stuff here. Now we're not really going to care too much about exactly all the various tables, but what we want to do is pay attention to a few things. One, when you notice it generates the tables, or your entity, excuse me, it will create the relationships for you by default. So it'll set your 0 to 1s and all that fun jazz for you. It will create the properties so the names of the properties match the names of your columns by default. That's actually a good thing in most scenarios. Now in some cases, if you're working with a legacy database structure and you maybe have white space in your names, bad, or you're using something like the underscore convention, you can change that here. So if I wanted to go in here, I could actually go ahead and change this from just being episode number to just number, and same thing with date. I can change that, and that will change it in my model but not my database. The next thing I want to take a look at is these navigation properties. Well, the Entity Framework has the ability for you to go from a child object backwards to its parent, or from a parent forward to its child. And because of this, it needs to have a reference to those inside the various entities. And these are done with navigation properties. And so you'll see that the episode column, or excuse me, the episode entity links to level type, so it has a navigation property that points you to level type. Same thing with authors, comments, keywords, links, series, sponsors, etc. and etc. So now that we have an understanding of what the generated model looks like, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple other things. First thing we want to take a look at is the details of how it actually takes care of the mappings. So if I choose one of my entities, I'm going to right click and I'm going to say table mapping. When table mapping comes up, it brings up a new pane. This new pane will show me how my mapping is actually done from the database to my entities. Over here it tells me all my columns, so here's my columns in my database. And then over here it shows me how it's mapped to the various properties in my entity. And if I want to change how it's mapped, I can change it here. I can say that, number or date maybe goes to create date. Well, that's not a good scenario, so we'll take that back. And I can change these back and forth. And that basically demonstrates how the various mappings are created. So now that we've seen how we can generate them, let's take a quick second and take a look at the generated code that is created for you when you set up your mappings. So if we go into Solution Explorer, come into our EDMX file and go ahead and choose the dimecastmodel.designer.cs file. So this essentially is the generated code that is created for you by the entity framework utilizing the T4 templates. When you take a look in here, there's a lot of code. The first one that we want to look at is the context region. This is our context that allows us to actually do the connection to the database and query the database. You want to make sure you don't touch this. This is a partial class, so you can modify this. And if you look in here, there's things like a onCreated that you can override. There's various object sets so that you can actually access things like episodes and authors and all the various entities directly off the context. There are add methods, so basically we can add instances of things into the context. One thing to understand about the entity framework is it cannot save, update, or delete anything unless it has knowledge of it within the context. So if you want to create a new author, you have to add an instance of that author to the context. So it's got all those methods already created for you, so you don't have to worry about that. And then down here we have our entities section. And these entities are the representation of your data model moved over into your entity model. And here you'll see that I have a class of author. It inherits off entity object. And it's got various different things such as factory methods that allow us to create a new instance of an author by just saying author.createAuthor. It has all my primitive properties, so basically these are all my IDs. And you'll notice that in the setter you have more than just setting the value going on here. What it's doing is saying if the value is new, go ahead and call into a couple methods, these onID changing and onID changed. I can override those in my own class and do something magical. It raises property change notification. Then finally we'll actually set the value. So you'll see changing a value within Entity Framework isn't as straightforward as pushing a property or value into a property and have it being set. It actually allows you to do a lot of actions prior to and post the setting of the values. So we have all of the various different entities that are here, and you can go through and you can click on these one by one. You can take a look at them. The one thing I'll highly recommend is when using the entity framework, when going from a model, or from a data first perspective, do not change the content of this file. The reason being is every time you update your schema and refresh it, you will actually get the code change, and you'll lose all your changes. In fact, to update the schema within the entity framework, all you have to do is right click on the designer, choose update model from database, and it'll bring up our wizard that we saw a few minutes ago. But this time it'll only show you the things that aren't part of the current context. So that's a real quick way that we can get up and running quickly by taking our existing data model and generating our entities off of it in order to start utilizing the entity framework. In future episodes, we'll take a look at how we can go from model first, and then take a look at how we can go POCO. And we'll also take a look at how we can modify the T4 templates that are used to generate the data model in order to customize what is outputted. So I hope you learned something. Until next time.